You are watching the Thrones. I'm Blake Graham.
I'm Tony Russo. So season 1 recap.
Let's get down and dirty with the Game of Thrones, because when you play the Game of Thrones, you live or you die in the wonderful world of Westeros with the Stark family of the North.
First season point of view is, I would say, essentially Ned Stark, Eddard Stark, who is the king of Winterfell. Up in the north of Westeros, he is like a feudal lord. In the first episode, the king, Robert Baratheon. I've just caught up on these videos. Blake has been reading the book. Baratheon visits Ed Stark and asks him to be the king's hand, which is like the vice president of king. Ned agrees to go down to King's Landing with him, which is where the throne is. He fears the Lannisters, as one family, may have killed the old vice king.
3 warring families. The Starks in the north, the Lannisters killed the old hand of the king, the Baratheons, who are claimed to the throne, the Iron Throne as they call it, which is in King's Landing, which is like the capital city of the 7 kingdoms of the continent of Westeros.
Yeah. Ned's family, the Starks, suspect that the Lannisters are also behind an attempt to kill his 10-year-old son, Bran. So Bran is climbing up a tower. He gets pushed down, pushed out of it, lands, forgets everything, loses the ability to walk, almost dies. They just really don't trust these Lannisters, who are the richest people in the kingdom, and they're very vicious and very blunt.
Their actual motto is "Hear me roar." The unofficial phrases to the Lannister house: "Rich as a Lannister." That's like the end all of having wealth. A Lannister always pays his debts. Unofficial mottos of the Lannister house.
Shitting gold is something that's brought up a lot with Lannisters. Everybody except family is enemies.
She says that to her son, Joffrey asks.
Rob Baratheon is married to Cersei Lannister. Mm-hmm. Kind of a political marriage. They do have a son named Joffrey, the heir to the throne, this little blonde boy. Eventually, as the season progresses, Rob is on a hunting trip. He may have been intoxicated somehow by a Lannister, ends up dying.
So he gets in a little bit of a confrontation with a boar. The boar happens to pierce his gut, and we find him back at King's Landing, in bed, impaled, and on the verge of dying.
So Ned comes in, and Rob's last act as king is to make Ned king, the regent, until Joffrey, the rightful heir to the throne, comes of age.
Right, but there's something sinister that occurs. So he goes to King's Landing with both his daughters, Arya and Sansa. Arya being younger, Sansa being a little bit older. She is to wed Joffrey and therefore become the future queen of the 7 kingdoms. He starts snooping around as to wondering why the previous Hand of the King died. So the previous Hand of the King is Jon Arryn, his wife's sister's husband, Lord of the Vale, previously now dead. He discovers Joffrey is not in fact the rightful heir to the throne, as Joffrey is actually the child of Cersei and her brother Jaime.
Her twin brother.
Sister fucker / Kingslayer.
You can tell at this point, Game of Thrones, there's a lot of intrigue and a lot of sex.
Hardly a boobless moment.
So this relationship between Cersei and Jaime is obviously scandalous and wrong on so many levels. Genetically, socially, they're just so blonde that I think it's a crime. Anyway, this is why in the first episode that Bran was actually pushed down from the castle tower. He witnesses Jaime and Cersei going at it, and Jaime just gives him a nice push.
As he pushes him, he says, "Oh, the things I do for love." Pushes the 10-year-old kid to his assumed death.
He doesn't actually die.
Right.
They're worried that he's going to come back, rat them out, and just ruin all of their plans to have the throne.
The Lannisters have their hands in every sort of thing going on in Westeros. The throne itself is completely indebted to the Lannister family. If there is no actual direct line to the throne, because Robert and Cersei didn't have any children, there's no Lannister claim to the throne, which becomes a huge problem. Because Joffrey's not the only child. There are in fact 3 children who are assumed to be Robert Baratheon's kids, who are actually just a result of incest.
And there are a couple bastard children out there, too.
They have no connection to the Lannisters. Robert got around, as they say.
There's a second attempt on Bran's life while he was comatose, I think. Now, Ned Stark's wife...
Catelyn.
Yeah. Catelyn suspects...
Tyrion
Lannister. Thank you. I have watched all of these episodes. I mean, trust me, I have. Tyrion Lannister, nicknamed the Imp, played by...
Pete Dinklage. Yeah.
Dinklage, who picked up an Emmy for this role. He's a dwarf in the world, and he's also very clever. So she suspects that it's him. She finds his dagger there, basically abducts him and hauls him off to Vale to be brought before a court.
She assumes that he was involved in the death of Jon Arryn, being the Lord of the Vale. So were they to bring him anywhere, they would try him there on 2 charges, really.
This is causing some terror in the Lannister family because by now, Ned has told them that he knows. The Starks have one of the Lannisters in custody. Robb dies, and Ned is essentially king at this point. So they're scheming. The Lannisters end up putting Joffrey on the throne, somehow getting their guards to control the city guard, the King's Landing guard, and putting Ned in prison for treason.
Robert Baratheon, former king before he died, wrote a note basically saying that Ned will serve as regent. And they basically say, no, we are going to betray you and not follow those rules. Because no one really in Westeros has any sense of honor at all. They imprison him. They say that he was trying to usurp King Joffrey. Because in the court he says, he outright says it in front of everyone, that he does not have a claim to the throne because he is not actually the son, which is a huge statement of treason basically in any political system at that time. Ned opened his big mouth and said so.
They have him for treason. They also captured Sansa, who was his 13-year-old daughter. And at this point, basically, it's assumed she will be forced to marry Joffrey. His other daughter, Arya, escapes.
Everyone who was loyal to Ned is slaughtered, basically, by King Joffrey, and he just kind of sits on his throne and cackles. This upsets a lot of people, specifically everyone who's still up north and very loyal to Ned Stark.
I think they're particularly upset when Ned is beheaded. You have the hero, ostensibly, of the series up to this point, the star name, Sean Bean, his head is just chopped off, and they don't really develop the fact that he's going to be executed. It's kind of like a rash decision by Joffrey.
Sansa basically pled before her king or her betrothed. They're not really on happy terms. Let my father confess his sins and what he's done, his treason, even though he didn't commit treason, really. Let him confess, let him then take the black, forsake everything in his life, renounce any sort of ties to the real world, and just kind of live out his days there. He goes before the crowd to be tried. He's supposed to go, he's supposed to confess, and Joffrey says, if he confesses what he's done, his treason, then I'll let him go. So he goes forth, confesses, basically degrades himself of any honor, and Ned is supposed to be like this pinnacle of honor. He's like the only honorable person. Joffrey is the right king, and I tried to usurp the throne, and then Joffrey's just like, okay, off with his head anyways. So yeah, the main character is beheaded. You have to realize at this point, if you didn't get it beforehand, Game of Thrones doesn't play by traditional rules, nor does it really care about them. And if you hadn't read the books, you're going to assume that he's going to be the guy that makes it through to the end and works it out. He gets his head chopped off, no questions asked.
So is there anything else to mention with that storyline? Oh yeah. Why am I forgetting this? So there's war now. Ned Stark still has a son who's the Lord of Winterfell. And he begins to raise an army because his father was just killed by the person who also tried to kill another Stark. These are acts of war, clearly.
Basically, and since the Starks have such a prominent role, and Winterfell is really like the center capital of the North.
So here you have Winterfell, and all the way down here is King's Landing. HBO said it was about a month's travel in their like feudal horse-based travel system. Over here is where the Lannisters are. This is where Stark's wife comes from. And basically, right afterwards, Robb Stark, who is now the Lord of Winterfell, raises an army and moves them all the way down to here.
He's the king in the north, as they claim him. He's very upset about what's happened to his family. And the Starks are beloved in the north. They've been protecting through Winterfell for like 1,000 years. So they're able to call in their bannerman, then raises this army, and then proceeds to go south towards the capital.
And with much success and a little bit of clever trickery, ends up capturing Jaime Lannister in battle. The Kingslayer
/ sister fucker,
who is known generally as the single greatest sword fighter knight in the land.
Jaime is under Robb Stark's control. So Tyrion makes a deal with the Hill people. Okay, so he's in the Vale, right? And have these weird customs where you can have someone fight in your stead. So you can have like a trial of justice, right? Or you can have a trial of combat. And then in a trial of combat, you can then choose to have someone fight in your stead. So he's basically in this giant courtroom at the Vale. It's tens of thousands of feet above everything. It's ridiculous. He says, I want to have a trial of combat. And then basically someone in the crowd just represents him because he knows that he will make him a very rich man. He wins this trial of combat. He's out in the Vale. He then encounters the Hill people. Says he will make them the lords of the Vale if they, fight with him. He then encounters Tywin, his father's forces, and kind of joins up with them. He basically has a conversation with his father, Tywin Lannister, who's always kind of looked down upon him because, he's an imp, he's a dwarf. Had he not been born to a rich family like the Lannisters, it would have been a sort of situation where, you have a dwarf child and you, leave it out in the woods for, the wolves or the animals to just kill it. Infanticide, abandonment. He basically proves his worth to his father. Tyrion has been appointed to act as hand to the king, Joffrey, in his stead, in Tywin's stead, while Tywin is busy fighting Robb Stark's forces.
That takes us over to Targaryen storyline, which happens across the Narrow Sea. The Targaryens are from Dragonstone. They call themselves Dragon Blood.
They ruled is because they had dragons, mythical dragons, which would, raise entire cities and stuff like that, and they were on their side. So they basically had this absolute control because they had dragons.
Despite that, they ran foul of everybody, all of the kingdoms within the empire. There was an uprising, and Robb takes over, killing the Mad King Targaryen.
Jaime Lannister, which we call Kingslayer, is actually him who ends up killing the Mad King.
So we cross over the Narrow Sea, and we go over to Dothraki Sea, where the second, major intriguing storyline is occurring.
The brother and sister, which are the two remaining Targaryens in existence, Viserys and Dany. Viserys has a plan to take back the Seven Kingdoms and reestablish his throne. He thinks the only way he can do this is basically by marrying off his daughter to a Dothraki warlord. He assumes that in this interaction of marriage, he'll give him his sister, he'll give Drogo his sister, and Drogo will give him his army. Viserys,
though, as you can tell, is not a nice person. He's wildly ambitious and full of himself. So when he gives away his sister, he gives it to this. The leader of the Dothraki is known. He becomes the leader because he's the most vicious and powerful of this nomadic war fighting horse people. And he gives her.
They're not horse people. They're people of the horse.
They're not sensible. They like their horses. Chances are, Dany is being raped by her new husband.
Right. But she actually kind of comes to power. She finds a way to dominate Khal Drogo, first sexually and then emotionally. She becomes one of the most powerful women in the show. And there's actually a lot of powerful women in the show. You've got Catelyn Stark, you've got Cersei Lannister, and then you've got Dany Targaryen, who is the Khaleesi, or the queen of the Dothraki people.
Yeah, she gains some kind of control, and at a certain point they decide, yeah, let's do this. Let's take our 4,000 horsemen and let's cross the Narrow Sea and go take over that kingdom. Doesn't work out all that well, though. Viserys is in a power struggle with Khal Drogo. Because of that, and because Viserys doesn't actually have any power, as much power as he thinks he has as the pretender to the throne, he doesn't actually have any. And he gets killed, just because he broke all of their customs and rules.
Viserys goes into, they have this inner chamber for the Dothraki people. And in this central city, no Dothraki is allowed to draw blood. Viserys draws his sword and it was hey, give me I want my crown. Khal Drogo has two people seize him. He then takes these random artifacts that are gold, melts them down in a pot, and pours the pot of molten gold onto his head, killing him and encasing his head in a golden crown of sorts.
Onto Viserys' head.
Right.
Not his own head.
Not his own head. He is not that powerful.
Coincidentally enough, though, Khal Drogo does die, I think, the next episode.
He gets in a confrontation with another person, and he actually walks into this other guy's sword, pretty much of his own volition. They don't have swords, they have decapitating tools. He walks right into it, cuts his chest, and then kind of goes on his merry way. Well, actually, first he rips the other guy's throat out. Khal Drogo looks like the guy who would always, you're always just waiting for him to rip someone's throat out, and when he finally does, it's really satisfying.
Despite Dany's best efforts with witchcraft to save him. Meanwhile, Dany, by the way, she was pregnant. Forgot to mention that. Somewhere along the line of rape and dominatrix sex, she is pregnant with a child, a male child.
The man who will mount the world.
A combination of the dragon and the horse, and it's supposed to be the best offspring ever. Because they're doing some kind of dark, mystical witchcraft to save Khal Drogo. The child also dies. The child is born as described as some kind of reptilian monster creature. Which is bad, because now Khal Drogo he does end up surviving in some kind of comatose state.
He becomes the modern equivalent of a vegetable.
Dany, who was Khaleesi, who was second in command, the queen, has no power anymore. And then her child is also gone.
And a while ago, she was also given these old fossilized dragon eggs. And so she creates this funeral pyre. She ties up the witch who was supposed to help save Khal Drogo. She goes to this funeral pyre, lights it up, hears the woman burning to death. The eggs are in there, and then she literally walks into the funeral pyre, which we assume would be very hot, but evidently it's not that hot for her, as the next day we find her completely naked and with 3 adorable baby dragons.
So she has dragons now, and people recognize these dragon eggs that she had the entire time was supposed to fund. They were going to sell them and then have them fund the ships that would cross the ocean with all the horses. Because dragons are incredibly valuable tools of war. And she has 3 that are just crawling all over her, treating like she's their mother.
Yeah, they're like her children/fire offspring.
Yes. And just weapons of mass destruction.
But they're little now. They're little for the time being. She's kind of assembled this force who bow to her dragons and to her authority as this dragon queen.
So now let's go to the other storyline, which is Ned Stark's illegitimate bastard son, Jon Snow.
Everyone recognizes that he's a bastard because his last name is Snow. So depending on where you are born and you're a bastard, that's how you get your last name. So if you're from the Riverlands, your last name's Rivers. If you're from the North, your last name is Snow. And anytime he introduces himself, everyone can immediately go, "You're a bastard."
So he doesn't have much option in terms of becoming royalty because he's not legitimate. So he goes in up north to serve at this massive wall they have that marks the end of the kingdom. So he serves with the Night's Watch, which are focused on keeping out the nomadic people of the Northland, as well as some sort of, how would you describe them, Blake?
There's these fabled White Walkers who are supposedly have been dead for like thousands of years, and that the wall was originally erected. It's made out of ice and was held together by like magic, and was originally erected to keep the White Walkers out, and anyone who is north, the wildlings, kind of in their own place. So while Jon Snow is on the wall, they bring back two people who were formerly of the Night's Watch, who had taken the black and were kind of on their side. They find their bodies, they bring them back to inspect them, and these creatures reanimate like undead blue zombies. There is something magical and mysterious that's bringing these people back to life in a way that they can't be killed, and they just kind of thirst for death. Jon Snow and the men of the Night's Watch, who have all taken the black, are going north to figure out what's up with all of these undead people and basically what they can do about it.
The universe right now, Westeros, how many kingdoms? 7? 5.
Seven kingdoms.
7 kingdoms. It's like a feudal system. Joffrey is king right now at the end of the season. It's a world where seasons last for sometimes decades. Right now they're in a 9 to 10 year long summer. But as the Stark's motto is, winter is coming. And so the entire time this season they keep on mentioning how it's been summer for 9 years. Winter should be coming soon. It's going to be cold, and it's going to be cold of epic proportion because the summer has been so long.
And the Stark motto, winter is coming, refers to them because they live so far north in context of Westeros and the Seven Kingdoms, but it's also like there's always something worse about to happen, and that's kind of looming over everything. So even though we have this internal political conflict between the Lannisters, the Baratheons, and the Starks, and they're all kind of fighting wars, we have these two separate storylines with the Targaryens. There's dragons, there's some mystical powers brewing over there, and way to the north there's more mystery and intrigue occurring in this cruel world of Westeros.
Yeah. There's so much foreshadowing that there's just going to be this terrible winter, and Night White Walkers are going to come and start massacring people with their zombified magic touch. And then there are also dragons coming, and there's just a war going on, like a traditional war, and a lot of sex. There's just too much. We haven't even mentioned a lot of things. You really have to watch them all to get any kind of good sense of all of the things that are happening. Like there are two other pretenders to the throne right now.
The world of Westeros is just cruel and dangerous, and there's no escaping that. The people in it are just broken and struggling for power, and we're all just kind of witness to that. It doesn't play by any storyline rules. I mean, we saw that when dead Ned got his dead head chopped off and
put on a pike for his 13-year-old daughter to stare at for minutes.
Yeah, we could go on about the atrocities of King Joffrey. He has a
troubadour.
Yeah, some sort of troubadour. He doesn't like the song, so he asks him, does he like his hands or his tongue better? And he says, well, you can't play without your hands. So he's like, okay, like your hands then. So then he cuts off his tongue for no good reason.
He's like 14, 15, and he's definitely already a war criminal.
Just an awful dude. Right after Ned's head is chopped off, he takes Sansa, his bride-to-be, who is Ned Stark's daughter, out to look at it, which he's put upon a pike. He also has the pike of the person who was like her school teacher while she was in King's Landing. Like all these people who had been very important. He just like is like, observe what I've done to criminals and what could happen to you.
Why don't you love me? No.
Yeah, right.
He kind of like, that's not a real thing. Yeah, definitely the highlight of the series is when he gets slapped, which has happened a few times. There are a couple like climactic in my own mind moments when Joffrey gets slapped, and you're like, yeah.
There's a conversation between Tyrion in fact, and Joffrey when everyone is still in Winterfell. And he has not assumed any sort of dominance yet. But Tyrion basically slaps him like 6 times in a matter of 30 seconds. And it's excellent, especially because Tyrion wakes up in a stable, like covered in hay. He's been like sleeping in a stable just because he's like a reckless, drunken, wonderful imp. Joffrey says some ill things about the Starks, and Tyrion just slaps him repeatedly. It's one of those moments that you treasure.
Yeah.
There's
my screen. That's a good gif. Or gif.
Yeah.
It just keeps going.
It's strange because those are like the only moments of justice in this world, I feel. Because everything really just gets flipped on its head repeatedly. And I think that's what keeps us so intrigued as viewers or as readers who are following the series. Yeah, I think that about wraps it up for the Watching the Thrones recap of Season 1.
Season 1. Next time we'll be doing Episode 1, Season 2, Episode 1. This time it'll be shorter, Watching the Throne.
Right.
Yeah.
Watching the Throne.